Looks like vinyl record back there next to a framed train poster. So we're really in this.
I mean, hey,
Am I able to plug these in? Is there anywhere I can plug these in at?
Yeah, there's like a thing way over here. So before we depart for our daily dose of lunch, I guess you could say, we've come up with a new idea. Lunchtime is what we're going to call it, with John Bozeka and Noah Hiles.
To be clear, I don't think we invented lunchtime. I think that was something that existed far before we were both on this earth.
So a new podcast called Lunchtime. There we go. Okay,
that is our idea.
Well, so a new podcast called Lunchtime. It's coming Monday, Wednesday, Friday. One topic, 15 minutes, just simple discussion. Noah and I will talk. We'll discuss whatever the topic is that's on our mind that day. Could be sports, could not be sports. I don't know. Just kind of depends, doesn't it?
Yes, and this all comes from, I'm a big lunch guy.
I know you are.
That will come up, I'm sure, in another episode. However, one of my favorite things to do since I've been hired full-time here at WHBC is take a nice lunch date with my good buddy John Bozeka, and on those lunch dates, wherever we might be, whatever we might be eating, we like to discuss some topics. And we have a difference of opinion more often than not, and I think it would make for some good content. So that's what we're going to bring to you today. And our first topic of discussion, John, is
the Pro Football Hall of Fame's list of inductees for the Centennial Class.
The special Centennial Class. I've really felt like during my news updates, I've said the word special far too many times.
It happens.
But they throw it in there in their press releases. It's a special thing. So, John, I'll start it off by asking you, what are your thoughts? Oh, you want me to read off the names real quick?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, so 15 people so far have been selected. There's going to be 5 more modern era candidates. Those will be announced the Saturday before the Super Bowl, and that will complete the 20-person class. But so far, we have 15 names. These are all the special inductees. We have 2 coaches, Steelers former coach Bill Cowher and Cowboys and Miami Dolphins head coach Jimmy Johnson. 3 contributors. They are Steve Sable of NFL Films, Paul Tagliabue of the NFL. I believe he had something to do with NFL Films, NFL Network, excuse me, and George Young, best known.
Tagliabue was a commissioner.
Oh, he was?
Yeah.
And I think he held. Oh, okay. Well, that's my bad. He also helped with NFL Films. And then George Young, contributor and general manager, most known for his work with the New York Giants during the Bills Parcells era. And we have 10 senior players that were named, and we have Harold Carmichael of the Philadelphia Eagles, Jim Covert of the Chicago Bears, former Pitt Panther, Bobby Dillon of the Green Bay Packers, the Vince Lombardi Green Bay Packers, Cliff Harris of the Tom Landry Dallas Cowboys, a safety, Winston Hill, a tackle, best known for protecting Broadway Joe Namath's blind side with the New York Jets, also played for the LA Rams. Alex Karras played for the Detroit Lions in the 50s, 60s, and 70s. He's known for his acting in the movie Blazing Saddles, along with a great NFL career up in Detroit. Donnie Shell, one of the many Pittsburgh Steelers who are now in the Hall of Fame. The Steel Curtain, he played defensive back safety on those great 70s Steelers teams. Duke Slater is on the list. He played for the Milwaukee Badgers, Rock Island Independence, and the Chicago Cardinals. Max Speedy, one of the best names in the history of sports, and if that's not an athlete before 1950, I don't know what is. Played for your Cleveland Browns in the AAFC and in the NFL, along with guys like Otto Graham, who's the guy from Canton.
Marion Motley.
Yeah, I didn't want to mess up his name. And then Ed Sprinkle is also on the list. He played for the Chicago Bears in the Hiles era, 1944 to 1955. I think that's everybody that I... Yes. All right.
Yeah, you got
so,
one.
John, you are I would like to say you probably know more about the history of the game, these old-time guys. You know more about the Max Speedies of the world than the average person our age in their 20s, than the average millennial, and then just the average football fan. I think part of that is your connection to Canton and your family history with the game of football and everything like that, covering it. But you really have a passion for the old school kind of selections here. What are your thoughts on this list?
I like the list. I am kind of up in the air about a couple names on it. I'm not a huge fan of the Jim Covert pick. I don't think he's really a... Here's my thing. I'm bothered by someone playing in the 1990s being a senior. I just am, because I don't think that makes you a senior. I mean, I know that it's 25 years or beyond to when you last played. That's what's considered like a senior nod, as the Hall of Fame selects this. But to me, it's bothersome that there's somebody that played in 1990 that's considered a senior. I think he should still be considered like a contemporary player, like a modern era finalist.
Well, the problem with that is you have a limbo where you have the modern cutoff, and then you have a whole bunch of guys. And our boss, Pam, and I were talking about this, how there's kind of just this backlog of players that were really, really good in the 80s and the 90s, where there were more teams and rosters were bigger, as opposed to, before 1960, there were less teams, there were less players on those rosters, thus having less Hall of Fame caliber players. Now you move to when the game really blows up in America in the 70s, the 80s, the 90s, when it becomes the most popular game in the world, or at least in our eyes here in America. You have so many more great players who are caught in this limbo where they're not going to get in over the all-time greats in their field, like Jim Covert isn't going to get in over an Anthony Munoz. He isn't going to get in over Jonathan Ogden, but at the same time, he still might be Hall of Fame worthy. But those guys are going to take votes away from him when he's modern era eligible. But what do you want to do? Wait until 2030 when everyone's forgot about him? And when he's a senior by your definition?
No, I just think that when you're going at a year like this, and this is what my interpretation, I guess, of this class is that it was going to be strictly guys that were like true old timers. And I don't even consider like Donnie Shell and like Cliff Harris to be old timers. Like the old timers on this list are the guys that are all gone. I mean, to be quite honest, the guys that are still around, like, they're really not old timers. Like, if you played in like the 80s,
they're old heads.
They are,
yeah.
But like they're not like old timers. I mean, the list that was originally given out had a lot more names on it that were old time guys, such as Ox Emerson, who was a guy in the 20s and 30s.
He made the final cut.
He did,
yeah.
But again, a guy like that who played for the Portsmouth Spartans. He should have probably been on this team, because this will probably be the last chance that a guy like that truly does have.
See, my counter argument to that would be Ox Emerson has had more time than anyone else on this list, excluding Duke Slater.
Yeah, but
to get and Vern Lewin. I mean, when you're Lowen, whatever. When you're retired in the 30s and you're eligible to be a part of the Hall of Fame, inducted into the Hall of Fame for nearly 100 years, I feel like your chances have come and gone. So I agree that I wanted to see them honor some of the old timers here, but I'm glad it wasn't just all old timers, because I think the whole point of celebrating a 100-year celebration, a centennial, is honoring all 100 years. And that's, have the modern guys, but then part of the senior list is, if you look, you've got players who played all the way back to 1922 with Duke Slater, and then all the way up to recently 1990 with Covert. And I like that it covers literally almost an entire century of professional football.
No, it does. And that's a good job by the Hall of Fame in that regard. But I also believe that there is an issue with the fact that, as I said, some of these guys are not really like seniors, and that's the problem I've had in the past.
But they are by definition. They are by definition because they can't be. So do you want to extend the modern period?
I'd like to. I think that would make more sense. I think modern era should be like 1972 forward.
What about adding just another bracket? Like you have your modern, you have your senior, something in between there.
And then limbo.
I mean, yeah, it would be a limbo, but like I do get what you're saying. Like I think it would be cool if every year they inducted one person prior to 1950.
Like last year, Johnny Robinson, for example, was a 60s era Kansas City Chief.
Yes.
And to me, that's a senior.
Okay.
Because pre-1970, like basically pre-Super Bowl.
Yeah.
If you played pre-Super Bowl, to me that makes you a senior.
My definition of when football really became football, what is it? It's the championship game, the Colts and the Giants.
Yeah, the greatest game
ever played.
The 1958 game.
Yes, and after that is when the 60s, and that's when Lombardi and the Packers kind of took off. That's when Landry and the Cowboys, and that's when the AFL started to really build and become a competitor to the NFL, and then, of course, they merged, and that's when football really became football. And I think you look at that game, and you look at what Broadway Joe's upset in Super Bowl III.
Sure.
And those two are kind of the first two real markers as to when football became football that it is today. But I think that, it would be cool if you got one old school guy, like I said, before 1955 every year. But I would like to make that a different category because I do think that there are guys. I mean, L.C. Greenwood wasn't even on this list, which is mind-blowing to me because as someone who grew up in Pittsburgh, I would argue that he was a much more important part to that defense and had an overall better career than Donnie Shell. And that's not taking away from Donnie Shell. I think that, the Steelers of those eras, I mean, another guy, Andy Russell, probably should be in the Hall of Fame too. But when you play with two other Hall of Fame linebackers alongside you, you get the shine stolen from you. And that's the case for L.C. Greenwood. He just happened to line up next to one of the best defensive linemen of all time. So you get opportunities to honor those guys, but also I think they do need to find a way to keep getting these older guys in, like you're saying, but maybe just one a year.
Well, Max Speedy is a guy that I've been advocating to get into the Hall of Fame now for probably about like 5 to 7, maybe 10 years almost.
Okay.
I mean, he was a key part to the Browns' success when they had Otto Graham, when they had Marion Motley, when they had, some of the other names, Dante Lavelli and Lou Groza and those guys at the very beginning when Paul Brown first brought the Browns along. I mean, he was as big a part to that team as anybody that they had. So he didn't have a very good relationship with Paul Brown, and that kind of hurt him at the time. Paul Brown kind of blackballed him in a way, so that's kind of why he wasn't in the Hall of Fame, and now he is. And that story probably won't get told, but people that know.
It's interesting. I mean, I looked at his numbers. He had like 800 yards receiving. That was a mark that didn't get like eclipsed for 2 decades stuff.
But it's like why Don Hudson was so great.
As much as you admire the old school kind of stuff, I do want to say on the other end, I'm glad it wasn't heavy old school because at the end of the day, while those guys are important to the history of the game, they did not play the same game of football that we all love and watch, and that everyone that made the game popular. And I think it is important to give acknowledgement to guys who did it when the game was at its highest. Guys like a Harold Carmichael, or even guys who didn't get in, Cliff Branch, who I thought would have been a no-doubter on this, or Drew Pearson, who was the number one downfield threat on one of the greatest, teams of all time on the 70s Cowboys.
Well, yeah.
I would argue that, you could tell the story of football without mentioning Cecil Isbell, but I would say, Cliff Branch probably appears a little bit more in that book than Cecil Isbell because more people were watching when Cliff Branch was playing, and I think that matters.
Yeah,
that matters.
But if you're going to tell the story of football again, you have to include what you're saying, the full 100 years.
Yes, but if the first 30 years were
and then some, I mean, you have to go back to
if it's kind of like in any movie, it's like when they're making a movie about a band. Obviously, you want to see how the band formed and how they wrote their first couple of songs. But what are you really there for? You want to watch, the stories of when they were touring and at their peak and hear them play all the hits. And all the drama when they were at the top. And it's cool to figure out how it started, but that's not the main part of the story.
Yeah, but to me, I actually think that passing and things were sometimes more impressive back then than they are now, because everything now is passing. I mean, so like,
well, numbers wise, yes, but so I just think
it's to me comparing things by numbers are stupid anymore.
Yeah, I mean, numbers are. I think you compare to other players in your era and stuff like that, and I will agree. Like, I was skeptical of Max Speedy originally. I mean, the guy played 7 years. And I think that
he's a great player, though.
But when you dominate like he did in those 7 years, he won some championships. He set some statistical records that lasted for a very long time until, like you said, passing became more relevant. That guy deserves to be in. Like, Gale Sayers only played 6 years in the NFL, but no one debates his, Hall of Fame worthiness.
Last thing I wanted to get to, because we are pressing against our time here, is that I thought the two coaches, I really disagreed with both coaches. I'm okay with one of the two.
Who are you okay with?
I'm probably more okay with Johnson than Cowher.
Really?
Because, again, Cowher's going to get in later on. Like, Cowher, my thing is this, is that guys like Coryell and Buddy Parker that have been waiting, like, especially Don Coryell, huge part of, like,
Air Coryell, the air raid,
offense.
Yes. And that's,
and then Buddy Parker was a 2-time NFL champion. I mean, he was a very successful coach. Granted, he had some.
My qualm would have been this. I would have liked to see 3 coaches and 2 contributors.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Rather than 3 contributors, because at the end of the day, I mean, Sable, Tagliabue, and Young, sure. I mean, Young found Lawrence Taylor, and who's arguably one of the best players of all time, and those Giants teams and everything. All of those guys are fine. But I think Cowher deserves to be in. Obviously, I have bias there. But I would have argued, I had a problem with the coaches too. My biggest snub is Mike Holmgren.
Yeah, but he's going to get in.
He will get in, but...
My point is that Cowher, and even Johnson for that matter, I mean, these guys are going to get in. I mean, Air Coryell I
don't like that selection method where he's going to get in, so we'll pass on him.
Yeah, Bill Cowher could have easily gotten in next year.
Well, yeah, but when you're talking about the Hall of Fame, I think you pick the best people available. And if year after year you don't end up being the best, I don't like the mentality of, well, you're the best, so we're going to pick someone who is a little beneath you, so, we can all get in. No, it's we're measuring you up against the other guys who are in the same conversation as you. And if you're the best, like when the blue ribbon panel looked over this, they agreed that Cowher and Jimmy Johnson were the best 2 here. At least that's how I would have looked at it. I don't think Jimmy Johnson only coached in the NFL for like a decade. And those Dolphins, no one remembers his time with the Dolphins. He didn't really do anything special there.
Yeah, but I think the Blue Ribbon panel, I mean, all respect to that panel. I mean, because it was such a contemporary panel to like modern day, and you had so many guys that, because you can't find guys that were alive, I mean, they're only going to remember the guys that are really in a more recent era.
I feel like that those guys probably more than anyone else know the history. Like if you've watched like the NFL film stuff with Bill Belichick, I mean the guy goes insane when he gets to talk about Bobby Dillon or somebody like that.
I'm not saying that Belichick doesn't know it. I just
think a lot of the guys, if you look at the names on those lists, I mean maybe the former players don't.
I think some of the names on there are questionable. That's my thing.
I don't know. I think that overall I'd give this list a B+. I like the way it was constructed. I would have preferably liked to see more coaches get in because while contributors are also important to growing the game and making football what it is.
Well, they missed a huge mark with the contributor. Ralph Hay should be in. How Ralph Hay hasn't made the Hall of Fame yet is a travesty. He was the first owner of the Canton Bulldogs. Like the NFL would not be the NFL without Ralph Hay.
And it would have been pretty appropriate on 100 years.
Yeah, with the Hupmobile and everything that happened here in Canton with Ralph Hay, that's kind of an oversight on the Hall of Fame's part. But otherwise, I mean, it is a fair B- list in my opinion.
B- list. So how do you feel about the sea of black and gold that's going to take over Canton this summer.
You know, I can't wait to see Max Speedy go into the Hall of Fame.
You
That's all I know.
think there's going to be a lot of brown and orange there to celebrate the 7-year distinguished career of Max Speedy?
I can't wait to see Max Speedy go
The
into the Hall
dog
of
pound
Fame.
going to show out for their boy Max Speedy?
You know what the problem is? It's lunchtime.
It
I'm
is
hungry.
lunchtime. All right.
So-
Well, thank you for tuning in to our first of hopefully many episodes of Lunchtime. I'm Noah Hiles, and he is
John Bozeka, and we'll talk to you on Friday.
All right.